Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Raf van Raandonk. I'm the CEO at Bubka. First of all, I would like to thank the crew at Bubka for making this webinar possible. And before we dive in, I also want to make a warm appeal to all marketers, advertisers, and agencies, an appeal to take the lead together for a future with sustainable brands. Some time ago, we placed sustainability at the center of our approach and ambitions at Bubka. And today we have developed a model to assure brand communication effectiveness based on sustainability. So we are a company on a mission. We are a member of the Shift and the first agency in Belgium on its way to become a certified B Corporation. And for those who just join in on the topic, B Corp assesses the overall positive impact of a company, and certified corporations achieve a verified score on the assessment, which is a third-party assessment of a company's impact to balance profit and purpose. There is an important momentum here. Not only will brands that fail in sustainability very quickly lose their relevance over the next decade, but on the positive, there are also enormous growth opportunities for sustainable brands if they manage to communicate effectively about it. And as advertisers and agencies, we have serious leverage and we can have an exponential effect. So it's time we start creating the sustainability category in our industry, and that goes for each brand and each product range. So today we reveal how this works in practice, how brands can be successful in the future as a result, and why marketers need to go all in now. So Tine and Wim, on to you.
All right, thank you very much. Hello everyone, thank you for being here. Am I on screen? Yes. Thank you for being here. We're gonna talk about sustainability and why especially marketeers need to go all in. And I am really happy that Tine accepted to join the webinar, because she is one of those marketeers that decided to go all in. Before we go into the topic, a quick reminder of humanity's challenge, the sustainability issue. We have a real deadline for that, because sustainability is, it's not about the end of the planet, or it's not about the end of humanity. It's about making sure that we don't make the lives of millions of people miserable in 2100. And so we're talking about the lives of our great-grandchildren. That's for humanity, for businesses. It's a huge transition. It's a bigger transition than the one we've known with digital. Some companies will make it, others won't. But that's okay. But for companies in transition, it's to transition successfully to a sustainable business. Now, for every company, the question is what you want to be. You want to be part of the solution, or part of the problem. And already now we know that if you are part of the solution, you're on the side of the profit. And if you are part of the problem, you will stay at the side of costs. It will become increasingly costly to be part of the problem. The more we get to 2030, the more costly it will become. And already now what we see is that companies that score well on ESG is environment, social, and governance, which is a proxy for being sustainable or for helping solving the issue. Already now we see that companies that score well on ESG, that they financially outperform companies that don't with 40%. So already today, being part of the solution is more financially successful than being part of the problem. Now, of course, being part of the solution is very important, but as marketeers, we need to come in because we're facing a huge problem, and that is the credibility gap. If we look at the Belgian consumer, by the way, the numbers that I'm going to give you is from the Duurzaam Belg. Quick commercial break. This is the book. There's a piece of research that we've done with the University of Ghent on the perception of sustainability of the Belgian consumers, and for example, what they expect from companies on the sustainability front. So what we see here, if we ask people, do you believe companies, when they talk about sustainability, when they talk about their plans, and when they talk about their pledges, then 7%, only 7% of the Belgians believe what companies are saying. It's the same for policymakers. Only 7% of Belgians believe what the policymakers are saying. The scientists are scoring better. It's almost 6 out of 10. But for us marketeers, this is quite a new insight, because we've never faced that problem. In advertising, we never faced, a problem where, when you decide to say something to consumers, that your starting point is they won't believe me. And here it is like that. If you need to understand that if you start talking about sustainability, that the starting point has to be that people won't believe me. So we need to sort of talk about it in different ways. We can't communicate about it in the business as usual way, because people won't believe you. So that's the first marketer alert. We need to be really careful about that. Of course, when I say we can't communicate about it in the business as usual way, what does that mean? It means that the way we do it now is not very effective. When we look at research from the EU, then we see that if they looked at the companies, all European companies, and all on their sustainability claims, and what the EU found out was half of the claims that companies make on sustainability are false. So that's the other marketing alert. We can't, I mean, it's a bit shocking that that you see that half of the claims that we make are false. What does that mean? It means that the claims are very vague. It's like sustainability is important, but we're not there yet. So, let's keep it vague so that people don't really understand all the details, but, we will be perceived as sustainable. Other things that the EU saw in the research is that companies are creating their own labels, which of course is a bit strange. So here the thinking is we want to do fair trade, but we never be accepted as a fair trade company. So let's invent our own label, which is not very credible. And the third thing that the EU saw was that some companies are hiding information. And that all that together makes that half of the claims that corporations make are false. And of course, if you put two and two together and you want to be part of the solution, then of course, if you have the lack of credibility, that is your starting point, and then you communicate on sustainability in a business as usual way, not taking into account this credibility problem, then of course you stay perceived as part of the problem. Which makes for sustainability, not only a way to, do good or save the world, but also as an important risk factor, and a risk factor that we need to manage. And as marketeers, we need to manage the perception, because as you see now, you can do all you want to be part of the solution. You can do a lot of efforts to sustain or to make your processes sustainable, make your supply chains sustainable, launch innovative, sustainable products. But if you still have this lack of credibility, and if half of your claims are false because you communicate it like that, then you're still going to be part of the problem, and you're going to be part of the cost side, not the profit side. So it is about risk management. And so it won't help that, you know, the climate won't help us in that perception or with that perception problem, because we know that today we are at 1.2 degrees global warming, and in 2030 we're going to be on 1.5 degrees global warming, and there's nothing we can do about that. No, that even if we start polluting tomorrow, or if we cut our emissions in half, this is not going to change. What that means is, for the climate, you know, the climate will become more stubborn and more angry the more we get to 2030. What that means for the consumer is that the sustainable problem, or the climate problem, will become more visible and more tangible. And so what that means is the creating the perception that you, as a company, are part of the solution will become increasingly important. The other thing is, the more we get this, the more we're going to get regulation. And for example, I urge you all to look for the EU, the new consumer agenda, which is the new law on sustainability, part on the Green Deal. It's going to get more difficult to be vague on our sustainability claims. The EU will take care of that. And the other thing is, what you see is, for example, the green asset ratio. That is for banks. Banks will be asked to publish their emissions on their portfolios. So, for example, AXA, the effect of all their assets and investments is global warming of 3 degrees. You know, so the context will not make it easy for us to create that perception of being part of the solution and fight that credibility issue. So we need to act urgently. So we don't have, you know, it sounds a little bit as a cliche, we don't have time to waste. No, we don't have time to waste on decarbonizing our economy, etc., etc. But we don't have time to waste on creating that perception of being part of the solution neither, because the more we get to 2030, the more urgent that issue will become. Now, what we've done at Bubka is, and with the University of Ghent, with the same professor who wrote the Duurzame Welk with, is we are researching how companies can turn that credibility issue around. So how companies can suspend the disbelief, and how companies can make sure that, you know, your starting point is not people won't believe me, but people will believe me. And so we found 3 things that are important, and it's a sort of trilemma. So you can't have, you know, it's not because you have one of the 3 correct that you're good. You have to have all 3. The first one is commitment. The second one is value creation, and value creation linked with the view of the consumer. And the third one is proof points. Now, to be credible, you have to have the 3, as I said. And now let's go into detail of the 3. First is commitment. So, of course, you will say, well, commitment, we are committed. But there are different shades in commitment, and some commitment will place you at the part of the problem, and some other degree of commitment will place you at the part of the solution. Now, if we look at if you stay business as usual, if you don't take extra commitment, then you're clearly part of the problem. Now, you would ask yourself, why would anyone be there in business as usual? Aren't we all in transition? Well, no, we're not. Recent research showed that 47% of the SMEs in Europe, in the UK, have no sustainability plans. So they have no plan, okay? And 30% says, it's not on my agenda and it will not be on my agenda. So not everyone understands that being part of the problem is a problem. A second degree of commitment is being a CSR brand, the corporate social responsibility. A CSR brand is, you know, is a CSR brand is not focused on, being part of the solution. A CSR brand is doing no harm. You know, it's about not making the problem worse, but not being. That doesn't mean that you're part of the solution. Yeah, that you're solving the issue. It's not. It's just about not making the problem worse. And then you have the purpose-driven brands. The purpose-driven brands is, as we know, they are part of the solution. They want to solve their bit, not the whole thing, but their bit. So they basically have a promise or a pledge that they, in this case, will be net zero 2050, for example. And then you have the activist brands. And the activist brands are saying, well, no, we're not going to solve it. We're going to solve our bit, but we are going to solve the whole bit too. And for example, if you talk about activist brands, Patagonia is one example of being an activist brand, and they sued the American president. They ask their consumers to buy less, so they're more into, we're going to solve this all together than just doing our bit. Purpose-driven brands, of course, you have brands like a well-known purpose brand is IKEA, which is doing really well. They have real plans to, they are responsible for 0.1% of CO2 emissions, and they have real plans and there are real actions to mitigate that. IKEA is a good example, a very good example of a purpose brand. They will become an active brand. You can feel that, but it's not there yet. Other brands are like Microsoft. Microsoft just 2 months ago, they revealed that plan that they want to become carbon neutral. So what that does mean is they are calculating the amount of CO2 they emitted since the start, since 75, and their plan is to neutralize all that in 2030. Another brand is Velux, which recently announced that they want to do the same thing. So they started in 1941. By 2041, they want to neutralize all their carbon emissions that they've put into the air. So that's commitment, okay? So you see, if you want to be really part of the solution, there are different shades of commitment. Some will help you create that perception, some won't help you. That's the first thing. That's commitment. The second thing is value creation. And so what we mean with value creation is the value that create in sustainability, the solution that you bring to the sustainability problem. And there it's important we have industry views, for example, bottled water brands. Their solution is they all focus very much on making the plastic bottles recyclable. But then you have the consumer view. Okay, for example, in Belgium, the bottled water brands, they all very focused, as I said, on making plastic recyclable. The one company that is not doing that because they don't have the resource to do that is Spa, and Spa is perceived as being the most sustainable brand in Belgium. Another example is of sometimes the gap between the two. By the way, we do a lot of research on this, and we see that in a great deal of categories, there's a real gap between the industry and the consumer. Another example is a famous coffee brand with a famous actor that is spending millions in planting trees. And when you ask the consumer if that's a good thing, they say probably it is, but why don't they focus on their waste problem? Because with their aluminum cups, they're creating a waste problem. We would like them to solve that first before they go start planting trees. So if you want to really be part of the solution, you have to make sure that the thing or the problem that you want to create, the sustainability issue that you want to create, is in line with what the consumer expects you to solve. Because if not, you're gonna not have that. You're not going to be perceived as part of the solution, or not 100% part of the solution. And the last point is, the proof points. And there also, there is different shades of proof points. The simple one is part of what is none. That's for the companies that don't have sustainability on their agenda. And then you have a lot of companies that come out with pledges, that communicate on their pledges, which is of course great. A lot of companies now are saying that they're going to be net zero by 2050, which is of course great, but not all pledges have a plan yet. And so the thing that you need, and so the plans means action, and that action is of course what makes you today part of the solution. If Patagonia says to their consumers, buy less of our stuff, less an action, and that is of course a proof point that gets you as part of the solution. All right, so that's a little bit what we are at. So we are sort of thinking and researching what will help companies to answer that credibility gap, so that whenever they communicate on sustainability and all the actions and the investments that they're making and the pledges that they're making, it would be great if people would believe that. And we know that for now, only 7% of the Belgians believe that. So we need to take action on that. We need to mitigate that because it's a risk. And so where we are at is that we have identified these 3 elements. And if you have those 3, then you can start suspending the disbelief. It's the commitment, it's the value creation, and it's the proof points. And of course, as I showed very quickly, there's different shades of commitment, of value creation, and proof points. But what we have to know, and what is important, is that this is the road to being credible, and being credible is the first part of the road to future profits. So that was a little bit what we want to touch upon now. But as I said, we are joined by one marketeer who went all in a year ago and is working on credibility, working on purpose, and so on. And so really happy that she wanted to share her insights with us today. Tina, thank you very much, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Wim, for passing the words. Let me first see if I can put the presentation on screen. Is this working? I assume this is a yes. So good afternoon, everyone. And actually, before we move on, I also wanted to thank both Wim and Wim. Wim de Mol from Poep for facilitating this great event, and also his crew, and also for sure Wim Vermeulen from Bubka for the inspirational pre-setting the scene. Great. And actually, I cannot agree more with Wim on the fact there is no time to watch and see. Now it's time for action, for integrated plans, for proof points, and for creating true impact. And I know it's easier said than done. And I think this is also why we are with 112 people following this webinar to understand how we can do that in an impactful way together. So who am I? I'm Tina, Sustainability for Growth Director within Danone for Essential Dairy and Plant-Based. So I'm representing EDP, and actually EDP covers beloved brands such as Activia, Actimel, Danio, Danette, Oikos, Danone, Hypro, and Light and Free. But I'm also happy and proud to represent Danone from the fact Danone is a company who has sustainability in its DNA since very long. And actually, if I say since very long or since the beginning, actually since 1972, it started with Antoine Riboud, the co-founder and CEO back in the time. In 1972, he made a famous speech. It is called the Jewel Project, where he stated that the responsibility of Danone does not stop at the factory gate. So actually what he said is that Danone's responsibility was named economical and social, which was pretty advanced back in the time. His son, Frank Ribou, reinforced his vision by integrating health as part of the mission. And finally, Emmanuel Faber, our chairman, known as a sustainable leader, unveiled Danone's One Planet, One Health mission when he started his mission. On One Planet, One Health, actually, the thing is that Danone believes that every time we eat and we drink, we vote for the world we want because of the choices we make. And actually, we see that consumers are changing their behavior. They change the way they eat and drink, and also the values they attach to food. Consumers are craving for change, and they do expect from Danone and large companies to use the scale of impact to change the world for the better. So One Planet, One Health, actually it means that it reflects the vision that the health of the people and the health of the planet are interconnected. And actually with this thinking, it's a step forward in making sustainability mainstream, from which Danone believes this is the future. What you see in the middle is actually that in 2020, only 1 year ago, Emmanuel Faber has changed the legal status of Danone, and he named Danone an entreprise à mission, one of the first multinational companies changing legally the status in the context of purpose. And it just states how serious we are about the dual project, as you just have seen in the introduction. And then at the right, you see the company goals, the 2030 company goals of Danone. There are 9, and of course, they are interrelated with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, so that we can maximally contribute to making the world a better place as per Paris Agreement. And there is one of these 9 company goals, which is a bit special, I believe, which is the one to be certified as a B Corp, because a company goal and certification, what about? So because you are attending this webinar, I assume you're into sustainability, or at least it's in your interest. And because it's the month of B Corp, even when Raf already touched based on it, please let me spend also 1 minute on what B Corps stand for. Why? Because B Corps, actually, it's not just a certification, it's much more a movement. It's a movement for companies to be the change. It's a movement and a community of companies to use business as a force for good. So actually, to be B Corp certified, you need to deliver on the 5 proof points which are on the slide at the right. I will not enter into the details, but it's all about governance, community, environment, collaborations, and client partnerships. So actually, this certification goes beyond environmental impacts. It covers how a company deals with people, with suppliers, with transparency, and so on for it. And the good thing is that to get recertified, companies or brands need to prove progress and improvements on these areas. And that's interesting because as such, B Corp can be seen as a catalyst for sustainable growth. And this is why Emmanuel Faber decided for Danone, instead of all the CBUs to be certified by 2030, to go for this ambition already for 2025. Understanding how a company is acting from a sustainable point of view, from an economical or societal point of view, is not only what companies want, but it's definitely what consumer wants. The more and more consumers want to know what the company is behind their brand and how this company is contributing to society and to the environment. Where so far and still now there are many certifications, valuable certifications, expressing goodness on one area, such as fair trade, such as organic farming, mainly on a product base. The more and more in the upcoming years, what we might see is that this will be further stretched to recognitions or certifications, recognizing good companies from a more holistic point of view, from a more ethical point of view. Why? Because consumption for the consumer becomes really a statement. And where company branding was used in the past as a kind of stamp for good quality, now more than ever, it will be an expression of what the company and the brand stands for if it comes to sustainability. So voila, with this introduction, let's move in how then to get started, to get sustainability integrated into the business. And if we talk about full integration, we can consider 2 levels of integration. Integration in the depth, and it's a bit what I illustrated with the Danone case. If it's part of the DNA, it's really an integration in the depth of the company or the brand. There is also integration in the width. And actually it means that it's super important to ensure sustainability is realized and supported by, at the one hand, the full company. So every department plays a role into that. If you really want to be authentical and impactful, it's so important that R&D is on board, strategy and insights, corporate communication, and that everyone is behind the thinking and the plan. But it goes beyond the company borders. It's also beyond because sustainability integration can go into partnerships. There are many organizations today, many intermediates today, and many platforms today that collect companies around sustainability to impact harder, to impact stronger. My belief is that a company that is trying to solve world problems on its own or in silo, it will be difficult. But if we can partner up, it will be much more impactful. So getting started. 2 steps. The very first steps is actually to understand what sustainability means to your consumer. It seems, or it sounds an obvious one, but it's so important. And why? Because sustainability is a very comprehensive topic. It's about CO2, it's about circularity, it's about regenerative agriculture, it's about transparency, so very comprehensive. And this is where it's key to understand what it means to your consumer, the one that you're addressing today, but also the one that you're addressing tomorrow or you want to address into the future. And if you look into this question, it might seem difficult, but it's not that difficult. I think as a marketeer, for sure, you need to understand the macro trends. Once you understand the macro trends, then you have to reflect on, okay, but what does it mean for my consumer? So what are the micro trends or the category specifics? If you're in fashion, if you're in insurance or in food, what does it mean to that consumer? And there are many sources to make this exercise. It takes a bit of time and effort, but it's worth it and it's needed. First, for the macro trends, I would say like, okay, what's in the media today? What are the big headliners? But also try to understand the full ecosystem. What's going on if you look into the agenda of the NGOs? Have a look into the government. What are they striving for in the short term and in the long term to really understand the eco landscape and the bigger picture? Then second, if you funnel macro trends to what really matters to consumers, there are very good reads out there. And one read, for example, is the Sustainable Belg, the book that has been issued by Wim and Gino recently. And it's interesting because it's full of local insights, Belgian insights for local companies that are doing that seminar here. And then finally, for getting to your category specifics, it is important to really listen well to what feedback reaches you. For example, through the care line, or by social listening to really understand what sustainability means for your consumer in your area. And maybe I can share some examples from Danone on health. Let's consider Activia. Actually, it's the case that the government is striving for sugar reduction overall in food in the context of minimizing obesitas in our society. And at the same time, we had consumer feedback via our brand health tracker, indicating that some Activia products could contain less sugar. This is where we accelerated the response to this need. First of all, by contributing a gradual decrease of sugar within Activia. At the same time, by launching 3 new references on the market, which was Activia No Added Sugar. A second example on Planet, which is not on this slide, is actually that Danone identified the ambition to have 100% circular packaging by 2025. So based on emerging consumer needs, we are now accelerating the roadmap with brands hitting the shelves now with recycled packaging already as part of the packaging, which will hit the shelves very soon. So more about this topic to come soon. And the last insight maybe I wanted to share on this one is that it's not just a once-off exercise. Sustainability is, it's not static, it's dynamic and it changes. And an example I can give is, of course, with COVID, what we have seen is that, for example, solidarity but also mental well-being are concepts that are gaining or conquering the sustainability concept. Or also, if we look into recyclability, just being recyclable is not, it becomes quite mainstream these days. Consumers are expecting more. They are expecting circularity, and ideally from second life or open loop circularity to closed circularity. So my clear invite is to find out what sustainability means for your consumers with an always on mindset. Then just a tip I can give you in the context of the WIT integration, don't try this exercise on your own, the consumer understanding, but involve people of the company, because it will help to come to something more consolidated. And actually it's what Danone has done as well. We worked with a cross-functional team from different departments to understand what One Planet, One Health, as just explained in the introduction, means now for the local consumer. What is important to the Belgian consumer, the Belgian shopper. So we translated that in a kind of one-pager. We came in the end with 4 key topics: new health, clean and clear provenance, circularity, and social. And actually below that you have 10 topics that we identified as being important for the Belgian consumer. And this one pager, it's our guiding star if it comes to consumer or sustainability insights. We use it internally, we use it externally, and it's embedded in the company, so it's very powerful. Of course, you hear me talking, 10 topics, it's quite a lot. So if you really want to move into the action, it will be important as well to make some priority setting. And how do you do that? Actually, a powerful question in this context can be where or what is it you want to be famous for? It really will help if you understand your intrinsic drivers as a company or as a brand to find the best synergy between what the consumer is looking for, what we just explained at the one hand, and what you can offer in line with your DNA. So that's a very powerful question, and it also leads me to the step 2 in integrating sustainability in the business. The step 2, actually, once you have that good understanding of what consumer or what sustainability means to your consumer, the next thing to do is to understand your own model. Your own model, your heritage, your reason whys, your strengths and your contributions. And it's not that difficult in case that if social and environmental impact were already part of the mission at the start. And I demonstrated Danone where it was clearly part of the starting position. I will not repeat the case, but also, for example, Colruyt, in an interview in Trends Tendance in Jan, Jeff Colruyt explained that since the years 90, they really see sustainability as part of their DNA, and it has been actively integrated in their mission and their sets of behaviors. And we all know a lot of companies that has been raised through societal and environmental mission. Some names has been raised already by Wim as well, such as Patagonia and many more. At the same time, if that's not the case, or it might be a bit more difficult if it was not that explicitly part of the starting position of the company or the brand, still this should not stop you. So also if you feel there is room for improvement, and I think there always is, this can help. For companies, what I would advise is to go back to start. What I mean with that is that go back to the why you have been raised back at the time. And even if you were in more functional stuff, very much or very often behind functional objects you are creating within your company, there is a higher need, because functional objects were mostly created to gain time, to gain or to express yourself, to make your life easier. So there is a reason or a higher need that potentially could be responded to. So this is helpful. Then if you look into brands, my invite is clearly to make sustainability contributions part of your brand's DNA by integrating it in your brand positioning model. The majority of brands, of course, work with brand positioning models. There is just one here. There are so many, the brand keys, the brand onions, the brand bulbs. It doesn't matter. The invite is ensure it's integrated in your brand positioning model. Moreover, what I would say is ensure that the sustainability contribution you insert strengthen your brand purpose or your brand essence. So don't choose something which is not interrelated, but ensure there is a consistency and that the two strengthen each other. Within Danone, we are striving for manifesto brands. It's one of our 9 company goals. So growing manifesto brands is important to us. And what is a manifesto brand? It's a brand which explicitly contributes to planet and health, ensuring full in-depth integration. And actually reaching that level of integration is a gift. And why is it a gift? Because once it's part of your brand positioning, if you then translate your strategic jobs to be done into your real brand plans, into your activation plans, sustainability will be naturally part of that. So it will not be something you have to think about on top, but that it really becomes out of the DNA of the brand. And yeah, that's a gift. I will give you an example of Danone, where we continuously balance between story do and story tell, because if it's part of your brand's plans, you start story doing. And by story doing, this is how you really impact. So an example on Danone, on what we do already since long, which is part of our heritage. One element is on the sustainable milk sourcing. We supply milk locally. We work with 90 dairy farmers, which are not further away than 70 kilometers from the Rotselaar factory. We aim for a more stable milk price and revenue versus the market average. We have audits in place to measure animal welfare, ensuring our animals are doing very well in terms of well-being. We maximize local feeding of the cows. And then finally, we have been recognized to have the best quality milk with the lowest carbon footprint in Europe. What we are doing with our farmers is we really look one-on-one with them, how they can reduce carbon footprint. It's something we do since years. It's not new, but it's because it's part of our DNA. This is how we drive business since years. Same for the local factory, which is the Rotselaar factory. We leverage local production of our brands maximally. The factory is working with 100% renewable energy. There is a waterless project in place to save water up to minimum 50%. So it's a principle of circularity which is applied on water. And finally, 97% of the waste that is generated is reused. And it's just some examples on how we drive business behind the screens, what we do behind the screens. And of course, then this is what it gives us a space and it gives us the credibility to bring that story back and to storytell to the consumers. So recently we changed the pack with the storytelling included for Danone brands. And also in social media, we bring these stories to the consumers. It inspires us to go on in the story do, because story do is what really makes the difference, because you act and you contribute to a better planet. There is a lot of story do in the pipeline of Danone mother brands, but I cannot comment more in this stage, but you might see or hear a bit more in a few weeks from here. And with this teaser, I move on to the last part of the presentation, which are just some tips and tricks, because my hope from the session is to inspire you and get you into the action to make sustainability part of your company and to create true impact. The first one is on tooling. Tools can be helpful. A traditional one which the majority of you might know, but which is very helpful as well in this setting is the impact feasibility matrix if you want to go for priority setting. Impact, what is the most impactful to consumers? So understand your consumer very well, but if you're good, you have done that homework. And then feasibility, and I think even the better word here would be credibility. So in which extent what actions or what topics can you deliver on in a feasible and credible way? And this will really help you into the priority setting, where to go after if you want to implement sustainability and if you want to make sustainability actionable. A second tool is more a mirror tool. It might be mainly interesting for companies that have more brands in the portfolio, such as Danone. For us, it worked very well. Actually, this tool, what you see at the one hand is the topics that are important to consumers, and then you have our brands. And what we have done, of course, this one is empty, but we have plotted what we are doing with which brand on which topic. And the idea is not to get all the boxes filled. That should not be the idea, but it was a very good mirror for us to understand what brand is acting on what, and where we feel strong about and where we feel there is really a gap to progress. So that was also very helpful. And last but not least, in tooling, actually my invite is to clearly define and quantify how success looks like if you talk about sustainability topics. The Merlin approach is a good one, which means is that you start actually from where you want to end. For example, what we have done at Danone, we identified when would we be happy in 2025, and we were ambitious, but it helps you then to see how the roadmap looks like and what you have to do now to ensure you deliver upon the identified topic. So these are good tools to potentially keep in mind. A second tip is more on the communication. Even when sustainability is there to land to everyone, if you want to make or create a bit visibility on sustainability, you can be very targeted. Most companies are working with precision marketing and have brand tribes in their scope. At the left, you see the ones of Daniel. At the same time, we have clarity on how sustainability segments look like. There are different sources. The one you see here is the one of the book from Wim and Gino, where you see the three sustainable segments: the resistors, the movables, and the movers. And actually what you can do, and it's also what we have done together with our media agency, we crossed the tribes on sustainability and on the brands. So to have a good understanding what to communicate to who, to ensure we are relevant with the messaging we put out there. And next one is on communication as well. At the one hand, it's important to be humble. It's also in the tone of voice. I think it's super important because not one company, one brand will change the world, but we can contribute to the max, and it should be our mission. At the same time, my invite is to dare to communicate, because what we see in research is that if you don't communicate, consumers think you don't do anything related to that. So you have to dare to communicate. But what is even more important is to story do. So actually my invite would be to really look into that balance between communication and doing, because it's mainly story do and doing that what will impact very much what is happening out there on the planet. Just some examples from Danone again, the local factory, we already touched based on it. We are pretty active in donation. And at the right, you see a volunteering initiative from our Danones only 1 or 2 weeks ago, where they have been cooking for people in need, facilitated by Opération Thermos for the people who know it. And the last one, actually, I already touched based on it, but my invite would be to partner up. Again, there are so much intermediates and platforms today to make a difference together. And we believe that if you tackle topics close to your heart together, the impacts can be so much stronger. I had a summary, but what I suggest is to skip the summary, conscious of time, because if you have listened well, that should have landed, I hope. But I'm curious if there are questions soon in the chats.
Yes. Okay. Do you hear me? All right. Okay. Cool. And now the video. All right. Before we. Okay. Okay. It said you can't start your video because the host has stopped it. Letitia, help! You stopped me for. You stopped my video. Okay. Yes, there we go. All right, before we go to the Q&A, I quickly wanted, so thank you, Tina. It's really inspiring, and you see how you think, and you also see what Danone is doing, which is impressive. It's clearly a purpose brand, and sometimes you wonder if you're not an activist brand. but we'll come back to that in a minute. Before we go to Q&A, I wanted to show you guys a little bit what we at Bubka are doing as a sort of a service portfolio for brands in transition. And there's different brands 99% of the brands are in transitions and are in different phases. And so what we try to do is help you in every phase you are. If you are at the beginning of the transition, then of course you have the research that we've done on the Belgian consumer and that will help you to define what your weak and strong points are. The other thing that we do is in-company screenings of the Decade of Action. The Decade of Action is a documentary, 35 minutes, which I co-produced with Bart Lombard. Bart is behind the screen, so hi Bart. You will, in that documentary, you will hear from the important voices in the business world. You'll hear from people from IKEA, from Patagonia. You'll hear Paul Polman, people from the London Business School, and Johan Rukström, which is the most important client scientist of today. And they talk about the urgency and the reasons why businesses need to go all in. The other thing on implementation is the sustainability workshops. And that's for companies where, you know, the strategy is set out and clear, but the implementation on the floor lacks a little bit. Those workshops will help you to get the implementation on the floor going. And on value creation, we have the sustainability brand scan, which I talked about, and which was the methodology developed with the University of Ghent, and which helps companies to pinpoint the value that consumers think they have to create, which for some sectors is really different of where the industry is heading, and to create that credibility, you have to sync the two. All right, so that's a little bit that. Now we go to questions. So the first question, I'm going to give the floor to Wim, but the first question is one I'm going to ask to Tina. So something really interesting is happening with your shareholders. So Danone is a really huge company, so have different shareholders. What we know is that some part of the shareholders are still very much on performance and profit. Other part of the shareholders are on profit, but also on risk management. They want to have the management of the companies really mitigating the risk of sustainability. And sometimes that goes well. Sometimes there's little, you know, some problems. Now, as Danone, how do you manage that, those two kinds of shareholders?
Okay. It's a fair question, Wim, and especially related to the media downfall of the last days. What I can say on this one is that the vision of Danone is to bring value to the entire ecosystem. So to consumers, to customers, suppliers, employees, food heroes, and shareholders, of course. And we intend to do that on the long term and on the short term. If you look into the long term, what is helpful in that is our 9 company goals, as you have seen them, and the One Planet, One Health mission. And our short term needs to serve our long-term ambition. And we need to keep up with performance, for sure, especially in periods where performance has been affected by COVID's impact. And it's not always easy to balance short-term and long-term, like in every transformation where companies are going through. It's not straightforward and there is not one answer. But what is key for us is to keep responding to what the expectations are from the post-COVID world. So to keep on delivering on localness, on recyclability, on climate, digitalization, and so on forth, and to stay agile in the way how we reach that.
All right, thank you very much. Wim, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you both for these amazing presentations. And we have some questions in the Q&A section. Also some people who put some questions in the chat function, but I noted that also. The first question is, I think, for Wim. One of the issues says Nicolas Lambert, one of the issues is that what consumers perceive to be sustainable is not necessarily what is technically sustainable. I think that Wim gave some examples of that. This is a real issue for marketers. So how can we solve this? For instance, scientists saying that biodiversity loss is a much bigger problem than plastic waste, yet plastic waste is probably seen as more important by consumers. So how do you solve this problem?
Well, it's a very good question. My advice would be to decomplex, make it less complex, because it's indeed the technical part, when you go into that, is really difficult. But consumers are not there yet. They just want to know if the product they buy is from a company that is, you know, part of saving the world, or doesn't care. And if they think that the company doesn't care, slowly but surely, you know, consumers will opt for the other choice, and will choose for the products that are from companies that are saving the world or help solve that problem. And so going to techniques of that is basically impossible, because not everyone is a scientist.
Mm-hmm. A question from Felix Hornaert, I think for Tinne, who suggested that companies should team up. How do you handle the risk of credibility loss when partnering up with partners that don't have the same level of credibility?
Also a good reflection. I have to say, I did not came across that situation yet. Why? Because mostly the intermediates out there have some criteria for others to participate. So maybe I can apply it on the B Corp community, but yeah, it's an objective third-party certification. So all companies joining B Corp have a good level of contribution and credibility. But also other platforms I'm thinking about, mostly the intermediate person makes sure that you fit to the criteria to be able to say something on a topic related to sustainability.
Yeah. Following that, there is a question from Stéphane Bouisseret, who wonders whether the B Corp is really the best framework, according to you.
I think it's a question that can be both taken by women and myself. We independently have chosen B Corp. I think it was a choice of Danone. We had Emmanuel Faber, who was a big believer into that. And I do see, if you see the community raising, that many companies think B Corp reflects a very good certification or recognition of companies doing good from a more holistic point of view. I think every company has to assess themselves what the good one is. Danone feels well with B Corp. Why? Because the 5 points I have shown you are also interrelated again with the SDGs who are developing. So it's also something which is moving forward into the direction to obtain the sustainability development goals. So this is where we believe it's a good one. We might have other reasons why Bubka has chosen for B Corp, and there might be more, and it will not be me who is indicating what the best is.
Yeah, same here. It's a difficult question to answer, because there's different platforms, and you choose one. B Corp, it is known to be a difficult one, because it's tough to get the license, but that's also a good thing, because you really need to be focused to get that certification. So, and that's a good one.
Yeah. Also, another question from Stéphane Bouisseret, maybe a $1 million question. At what stage of transformation is it appropriate to communicate for a brand? Tinne or Wim?
Okay, Tinne, you want to take that one?
You go first, I can build on you, Wim.
I don't think that's important. I don't think it's important on what phase you are. You just have to communicate, you know. It's being part of the solution. So even if you start, you have to communicate because you need to build that credibility and you need, yeah, you want to be part of the solution. So it doesn't matter if if you're like the big companies like Danone, Unilever, they are far beyond starting. But there's plenty of companies that need to start and are starting. So there's no typical tipping point where you can say, now I have done enough, and now it's good enough to communicate. No.
Yeah, I'm fully with you, Wim. I think it's part of who you are, and this is where you can express that at any time, and especially from the beginning, because you want to make consumers aware what you're standing for. And I would say, don't wait till you have the perfect story. Sustainability is a journey. I think it's more about what is your intention, how do you get there, and what are the proof points step by step you are working on or realizing that you can communicate. But don't wait. Consumers expecting that you are communicating on what you do.
Yeah. There is also a question by Abraham Marie Walsh on the factory of the future. How are the stakeholders perceiving this project? I think it's a little out of the marketing field, maybe, but you have to communicate or market your ideas or your developments also towards your stakeholders, I think.
Yes, I'm not super clear about the question, to be honest. It's true that Danone has been recognized as a factory of the future. We're proud of that because actually it's a recognition of many sustainable proof points as well that we have put in place. Yeah.
Okay, maybe the Abraham Marie Walsh can maybe ask some other question to be more clear. In a question by Greg Berleur, in terms of companies inventing their own labels, what work could be done cross-industry in Belgium to simplify the choices and to enable consumers towards sustainable purchases?
Not sure what the question is. Is it that we have less labels or one label? I'm not sure what the question
is. There are a lot of labels. I think that the question is, how could you provide for a cross-industry solution on labeling products and so make it more clear to the consumers?
Well, I think there are indeed some labels that we can use, but not enough companies are using them. So let's start with that and prevent for companies inventing their own. But let's start with the ones we have and use that, and that will be a big step forward.
Yeah. And one last question for the moment. Is it realistic budget-wise to have such an extended sustainability program for all companies? Or is it only realistic for big companies? That's...
Yeah. I would dare to say that it is realistic. And again, because communication starts with just, what you stand for. And you do see a lot of small entrepreneurial brands popping up, gaining in relevancy, just because they bring the story of sustainability or how they act with sustainability. So for sure, again, if you look into the newer, smaller brands popping up, you will see a lot of proof points that it is feasible for small brands to bring the story of sustainability. I'm convinced of that.
Okay, thank you. Announcement. I think that we can stop the Q&A now. So thank you all for watching this, and thank you again, Wim and Tinne, for these presentations. So in the following weeks, that might be interesting for all, Bub and Bubka will be publishing a series of videos on the decade of action in the daily newsletter Pub News. And also there will be a replay of this webinar one of the following weeks. And in October, Pub Magazine will be organizing the 4th edition of Orbit. That's a conference on sustainability and communication. So see you soon, and thank you for watching us.